Does this work? Ah, yeah, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, there it works, huh? Welcome to this evening's keynote lecture by Sam Chermayeff, who is an architect, designer, and teacher undertaking projects worldwide. Trained in architecture at the University of Texas at Austin and the Architectural Association in London, Sam is the founding partner and director of the architecture firms June 14th Mayer, Gronberg and Chermayeff, and Sam Chermayeff office. With offices in New York and Berlin, the studios work on a wide range of design-driven projects ranging from large residential towers to community centers to kitchens and furniture. Clients include the state of Albania, the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, the lighting manufacturer Floss, the furniture company Knoll, and many more communities and private persons. He has taught at the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation at Columbia, at the MSA in Munster, the Royal College of Art, the Dessau Institute of Architecture, Cornell University, and the AA. He is now currently the professor of Studio One at the Angewandte in Vienna, which that just started, right? That's a recent appointment of only a few weeks. So at any rate, it's great to have you here, Sam, to give this keynote, which invites people at the forefront of design practice to present their work. So thank you for being at the Berlage, the Faculty of Architecture, and the TU Delft. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam. I got nervous for like the first time in a long time before giving a lecture, and I actually spent all day like in weird cafes in Rotterdam, like working on this lecture. And I shit you not, it was like 320 slides this morning. And that's because I did a lot of work this year, and I haven't given a lecture for a minute. And so I'm very, very confused about what I'm actually doing. And I'm about to show you things that I didn't show anybody else, mostly stuff that I can't confirm is good, even. But I have different directions, and I'm trying to square up what I'm doing. And trying to kind of take this moment to think about what I do. This moment, I don't mean like the broader moment, I mean like this second. To think about what I do and try to figure out like which directions I want to go. And I changed my mind, and I realized in making this talk that I change my mind about it many times a day. Meaning that I like clear thinking sometimes, and that I want to deconstruct everything at other times. And those happen in the same projects, in the same breath, and then sometimes one of those things wins and sometimes not. Hopefully this will bear itself out with images, and then you won't have to, it's not at all abstract. Because I wrote some weird title for this exhibition, like I got what I wanted and I'm unhappy about it, and I'm not unhappy about it, it's just like I don't really know. So, to be very simple, to reintroduce myself, I'm a New Yorker, I happen to live in Berlin, and I make a lot of things. And I don't often, write about it or try to explain it, and I'm not in love with other people's explanations about it either. So, but I'm here lecturing, so I have to speak by default. I'll just start with kind of our most happening building, where our office is and where I live, which is a Baugruppe in Berlin on Kurfürstenstrasse that I did with my partner, one of my two partners, Johanna Meyer-Grotberger, and it's a 25-unit building group which is in like a very regular European site from the point of view of Berlin. Like, it's a corner, it has to align with 19th century rules, because weirdly in Berlin in particular, 19th century rules are what like makes urbanism, according to the Germans. And it's a kind of Baugruppe in the sense that like all the clients built it together. So there's no developer, and the people who were working on it all together are the people who lived there, including myself. And what happens basically is that 6 double-height towers overlap into each other, and so people kind of fold into, one apartment folds into the next, and you get these double-high spaces with very grand spaces and very small, intimate spaces. You can kind of see the double-high and the little nooks as you kind of peer in there. And you can imagine where it overlaps, where the rectangles overlap, you get bedrooms, kitchens, small rooms, bathrooms, etc. And then where it's not overlapped, it's 5 meters 20 tall, so you get quite big, grand spaces that are, the word, because I used to work at Sana, the word that Sejma would say is like softly divided. So you have these big spaces that are connected, but you can also have like separate activities, vaguely related but separate. It's quite good. Like my kids really like it. Like they can play in one corner, and I can do something in another corner, and they feel like it's their corner, but they feel like I'm potentially there to be bothered on purpose. And I want to convince, which is very, very hard to grasp from the photos, but only in this plan, that it's only one grid, one shift. It's like a very, very simple, clear piece of design in the sense that half of those towers are parallel to the street on the right, and half of them are parallel to the street on the top, and that makes just like one turn. And so it's not as like wild and crazy as it might appear at first. It's always like fun to claim to be rational. Just because this is a school, I thought I'd mention that we made a lot of options, like a lot. And so I worked on it. I'm 43 now. I was 29 when we started that thing, and I had a lot of time. So I made thousands and thousands and thousands of those models, wherein my partner and I decided, okay, we need big spaces, we need small spaces, meaning like this Altbau way of Berlin in particular, but it applies here too, where there's almost like a metabolist grid from 1890 that like a living room is a dining room, is a bedroom, it's all the same thing, and kitchens and bathrooms are half of one of those bays. We decided, no, we need extreme small, extreme big, inside, relatively normal size apartments. So all of these options are ways to do that, like this one that's like with the 3 white stripes would be like sleeping, bathroom, etc., like closed tiny rooms in white, and then they'd all be duplexes, and then there'd be like a kind of bright, open living room situation above in like a different way to organize that same idea. This is quite a jump, but it's what's nice about it is that we made a community that we kind of gather all together, we hang out all together, and the community aspect of it is many things, but it turns out in retrospect to be partly architectural, but partly just like we made a building together with 25 people, which most of them are married or have in some kind of relationship, so it's really 50 people. So it's 50 people who are suddenly like in each other's lives, and it was stressful. It's stressful making buildings, right? So somehow they all know each other, and they all hang out, and they all party all the time, and actually like that lady, this lady, borrows the house of another lady who she met. The other lady has a house in New York, and they switch, and it's an ecosystem and it can work. That's all I want to say, that architecture works. Not fully my claim. And it's a weird house also related to the gathering thing, that you see each other, which you can imagine from that other images and the plan. Like if you look out one window, you see into many other apartments, which is quite a special thing that I didn't totally register was going to be as great as it is. I said, don't worry, you can put curtains, right? I mean, I'm American. I got many times accused of sounding like a used car salesman. Like, don't worry, the form makes it like that, but you don't have to be bothered by each other. But it turns out to be extremely nice that you see your neighbor in a way that I hadn't predicted, in a very, very simple way that like, even I really have to lean out of the window where this particular photo is taken, and that happens to be my brother, who rents the apartment one floor down and one floor over from me. But looking at my brother, like I just kind of know he's home most of the time. Like I have to go out of my way and he has to sit in the corner, which he only does in the context of this photograph. Like he never sits right there looking the other way. But I wanted to express that this photograph is kind of nice, that you see the street, you see your neighbors, and somehow you're not alone. And for whatever reason, we have like a lot of people in their, like late 60s. I think my brother just turned 70. And he's friends with that other lady, and they all they hang out, and they have this the fact that you see each other makes community. Like it's an odd thing that architecture for centuries was interested in essentially making castles where inside and outside are really a strong division. And I should give Sejima credit, somehow in Sana you learn how are you gonna make inside outside blurred, right? And this is how that works there. And it means also that you have to kind of be vaguely respectful of your neighbors, so that somehow works. Although people yell at me because my kids are too loud or whatever, and I'm like, what's the kids? They're going to go to bed soon. It's you have to negotiate a little, and that negotiation also makes life. I don't know what I want to talk about with this. This is going to be a very long lecture if I go this detailed. But that's a kind of inside space where you can see a small space and a big space together, working together. I'm going to come back to this tent thing. On another kind of iconic thing of mine, iconic's not the right word. It's just people come up to me and are like, "Are you the triangle bed guy?" And I am the triangle bed guy, and that's fine. The triangle bed thing it's a bed, right? It starts out way before I had kids, so it starts out as a kind of possibly illicit reference, and then it becomes a place for my kids. So the point is that it works for many different things, and what it really does is it really is nice for the other corners of the room. And I didn't realize that when I did it. I just screwed around let's make a bed that's a triangle, feet are smaller than shoulders, which is I mean, to be clear, it's a pain in the ass to do the sheets and yada yada, but other than that, it works fine. But what it really does, it somehow makes it work, all the other sides of the room work. Even if you put one side against a wall, you somehow, if you think about your bedrooms now, everyone's bedroom, with everyone's rectangular bed, it's somehow the rectangle dominates the room, and it creates an orthogonal grid. And if you break that orthogonal grid, you get all kinds of higher quality other orthogonal corners related to the room and not which I realized later is true for almost everything you put in rooms. It's just working it slowly. There you see, yeah, and then it works as a little world. It works for many things. And it works for jumping around, obviously. Now this other thing, and I'm just starting with getting through what I've been doing for years and years. So I make a lot of kitchens for cooking together. Straightforward thing. Kind of odd that people didn't do that before, but I made round stove, and people love it. People buy it, people are obsessed with it, and very happy. You can store stuff, but most importantly, you can cook and you can talk to somebody else, and you can make, you don't have quite the kind of male stage thing that accidentally happened with the kitchen islands, the undoing of something turned out, and then Eddie Heathcote was yeah, but now you're just presenting yourself on your big fancy kitchen block. Also bad. And somehow in the circle, you create equality. I mean, equality is an exaggeration. You create a movement so that there's less hierarchy. Same with the triangle kitchen. I mean, without making a big story, what's good about that is you can talk across the corner. So you can say whatever you want. You lose a less than a square meter in the inside, right? Which you store whatever old crap in the back, which you can kind of get at through one of those doors. I forget which one, but somehow you can get at it. But basically, you cook and you look outside, so there's a window to the left, there's a window to the right, just in almost every apartment, right? Particularly in Berlin, where the pipes are very rarely on walls with windows inside apartment buildings, right? So the pipes with the water is generally on a internal wall, just a fact of just something I have observed. And so you face each other, so you cook and you wash and you know, okay, the downside is you have to like walk around that little corner. I think it's worth it. That's all I want to say. I just like this photo. So we've been making just like an ungodly amount of kitchens, and sometimes we're putting them together, right? So like a big part of what we do is put them together, apropos that circle and that triangle, and we make more triangles and more circles, and then but this is just like drawings of. We make a lot of them, and I'll show a couple more, and then we'll get on to other things. This is the first one but this is before I could cook, right? I mean, I can't really cook now, but I'm more ambitious about it now. And I mean, you know, you can see that there's a very heavy light on top of the stove, which means that I use the toaster more than the stove, which has changed. I've grown. My children eat, and so on. But it just occurred to me that like you could deconstruct the kitchen, and so that's what I did, and then. That deconstruction is still the project that I'm on. I think it's like at least 10 years. And so now for like these other architects, Solid Objectives, one of them happens to be Dutch, who are very, very happening architects in New York, we're doing their kitchen, and we're just like taking the deconstruction further and further and bigger, and like what are all the parts. So like without like making a big story, there's 2 different stoves and a giant industrial fridge and a bar for people to work at, and other storage and a place for people to lean and an ice maker, yada 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 yada. So just I don't want to express anything with this drawing, but I like how the deconstruction is like manifest visually, like that somehow like the work in my office to figure it out like led to this color thing. They're all stainless steel. But it's just that, like, so that you could see what function was what, whoever was drawing it in the office made them in all different colors to somehow read the thing. And so, like, to like arrange it and figure out how each little pipe gets where. Because it's, in the end, like, you end up thinking about plumbing a lot, of course, if you make kitchens all the time. And this is like a kind of earlier, with bathrooms, it's like even easier to deconstruct because they're quite clear. And this doesn't need to be explained. You understand with this deconstruction. And then this is like a new one. It's like more reconstruction. But I'm still like putting things together, right? Oh, I forgot to show. I made this table, which is actually just as good without the burners, oddly. Like it actually makes sense to have 3 thin legs and 1 fat leg. It's just that it's nice in like architecture school logic to have a reason to have a fat leg and 3 thin legs, because then you have the gas can inside that thing, and then, of course, like that takes all the moment connection, and then you can have these very, very thin legs. But this is like my confusion. Like, it's definitely nice to cook on that table. Turns out to be nice to cook on that height and not 90, and that's just the Nazis who invented that. That's like Neufert, the Nazis, that's a standardization thing. Don't be fooled, people. So many things that are taken for granted as architecture precepts are invented by the Deutsche Industrie Norm, which is in fact Albert Speer. Remember that. No, really, I mean, it's just like, it's nicer to cook down here. Like, just, period, try it. You can see into the pot. It's like, it makes sense on so many levels. But of course, I'm back to that community thing, which is obvious that you cook together with your friends and you end up like having a communal experience and somebody's sitting down at the table. And I thought a long time ago that everybody wants to cook with you and like everybody wants to join in. But as I get older, I realize like actually a lot of people just don't. Like a lot of people just want to sit and like smoke a cigarette and talk to you while you cook dinner, which is fine. And this table works both ways. The guy asked me for a shop, and we were like, what do you sell? And he was like, cheese and wine. And I was like, so everything's cold, so we made a giant refrigerator. End of story. Apropos the rest of the lecture, like that's like on the topic of like real clarity. Like I didn't have to combine something. It's just a refrigerator, done, and it's like done. It's like one thought, clear thought. He called it fresco. Before, it was called fresh. It's like, it's in there, it's in everything, you know, it's like a tremendous amount of work to build a refrigerator like that, but also not. And I did that together with Brenda Hoover, who is a big fan of like this saying, like, kill the rabbit. Like, he was like, yes, refrigerator, done. And I don't think that's all he did about it, in fact. Like, he just said, like, he just approved the idea of refrigerator. That was like the only time we ever talked about it. At the time, he and I shared an office. Very good architect, Arno Brandon Hoover. And then this is his kitchen, which is in this, I should mention, it's in this house of Fry Otto. And Arno's a tough client because he's a good architect. And we do a lot of architects' kitchens now, as you can tell. And this is just like a bean shape, which has related to do like the form of the room, and then the deconstruction goes underneath. So this is like a mix between like the clarity of the bean and the unclarity of like the deconstruction underneath. This is the theme of this lecture. It doesn't get clarified, it's just repeated over and over again. Something we did earlier in the year, we decided to make an exhibition about tents. We had this idea, my partner Barbara, a different partner from the other partner, was like, I want to make tents. And I was like, fine. And so we called up this fancy fabric company called Meharam, and we made a series of tents. And I don't quite know what to say about them, except that I like a lot the idea of study, and I like the idea of freedom, and I like the idea of inside and outside, obviously, and like not being clear about what space is what. So all those kitchens generally are not like, they're not interiors, right? Nothing that I show, I don't make interiors, it turns out. So, but I also don't really make exteriors, really, like that facade, they could choose which one's open. Like, okay, I'd be lying if I didn't like clearly curate that facade of that previous project, but in principle, it is what it is. And the tents thing brings you into what is what it is. So we tried to do a kind of study of typology of like different, like how do the different tents of the world get made? Like what's the structural logic? Individually, I think each one of these things is hideously boring and very obvious, and indeed that Bucky dome is like a thing you order. I just painted it white, but it's a thing you order on Amazon for $200. You know, I don't want to make a big story about it, but it's like, okay, let's just like look at Bucky's logic. Let's just put it together, feel it. You know, it no surprise if you try to make a square, funny-shaped tower, it really doesn't work. Like, so that one failed, like just failed. And so I'm into studying things and making opportunities to study things and trying to, and it turns out like if you make it super tasty, everybody's happy and nobody cares whether it's waterproof or what the point is or what you're really all about, as long as you have like a clear story that you're doing and then you kind of play it out and you follow it. And maybe it'll lead somewhere and maybe it won't, right? I don't know. I mean, it was an exhibition, people liked it. So in that sense, party on. And then this leads me to this other thing that I do now. So I've been doing wacky stuff, and a lot of that, like the triangle bed and so forth, you know, that's like a little you know, it's 20% provocation, 10%, 80%, I don't know, some other percentage good idea and some other percentage something else. But definitely 20% provocation. And that's kind of true of a lot of things that I've been working on. But then I really don't want to have the problem with provocation and the problem with like that like space in the architecture world is you're only talking to very rich people. Triangle beds are not in discussion, are just not accessible at all conceptually to anyone without like quite a big apartment and quite a big bank account. It's not because it's so expensive, it's just you can play it through. It's like it doesn't have reach in that sense, right? It maybe as an idea, but not as an object. And I care about the object. So onto this light. I can come to the store later, but we convinced Floss to make this light, this thing that we made a mock-up of. It's so fun. Yeah, you're gonna get the idea in a second. And then it goes like that, and then it goes. And I went last week to the Floss factory, and sure enough, they made them all. And all that I did, I'm gonna come to this, all that I made is that little brace and that little counterweight, and I'm super chuffed about it. And you know what's really good about it? Although this is recorded, and I'm sorry, Flos. It's like an idea that you could steal and remake for 10 cents in China or anywhere. And it's, okay, it won't be like super refined in Flos way, but it's like they made it like super slick from my, I made that thing, and then we made some fancy renderings, and then some fancy drawings, and then they made it like super nice in everything, and it's their track, it's their spots. I even have to I have to share my royalties with Jasper Morrison if they buy the glow balls, which I'm totally fine with, obviously. Because I'm trying to get to like Castiglione's thing where he just like made a Fiat, like the light, you can look it up, but there's a famous light that's like a Fiat lamp going up, and he's like, I just found a headlight from a Fiat, Cinquecento, and now it makes the whole thing, which is just like me, half true, right? I just found a thing, and I made a brace, and it's like no big sweat. And I had such a great meeting today about a new one with a counterweight, and now they really like it. That's it. I'm happy about it. Because I used to do this. So I used to do this, which is also really cool, and it's frankly like radically more spectacular, which is a stock standard streetlight on a table that, has its own sense, because the problem with everything in the world is the base. Just apropos, like that's true of the tower that's going to come soon. Like it's just like, fuck, how are we going to deal with how it meets the ground, and I don't want it to fall over. And so that's one good solution for that. But that's what I've been doing. That's like what we did like a decade of that logic. And it holds up, and people can still buy that. But again, I speak to only rich people when I sell Streetlight coffee tables that are made of mirror-polished stainless steel, right? So even if I make it not mirror-polished stainless steel, it's still, it takes 4 guys to deliver it to your house. Forget if you live on the 10th floor. So it's not unlike the other thing. So the other thing is like kind of, on the other hand, this is clear too, so, I'm debating. Another thing that I'm probably not supposed to talk about, because it's like, I'm probably not supposed to talk about that light either, whatever. Nobody's gonna mind, I hope, sorry. So Florence Knoll is a kind of quite famous designer and still has a company called Knoll. She's passed away, but the principle stands. And she made a ton of credenzas, and she made them for the office, right? Today I didn't get there, but that SOM building in Rotterdam, that like these 3 buildings by the water that I'm very intrigued by. This is the kind of place where you would put such a thing. But apropos that buildings have turned into housing and hotel, right? So I'm trying to turn her things into domestic, office to domestic, right? And then I made a simple claim that the Knoll system that she designed as a series of objects is in fact a system. So like Knoll is like USM or Vitso, right? And not to be confused with I'm as good as that, just that she is, right? And so then I started designing every single thing you can come up with under the sun using that very, very simple logic of, metal feet, wood box, marble top. And it turns out it's working great. And then at first I was like, let's go crazy, and then as ever, more simple, let's make it more like Florence Knoll. Do and these are just like new versions, Like, can you believe there's no dresser? It's just like, it seems obvious that you would have a dresser. It's kind of shocking that there was no dresser. Anyway, there's gonna be a dresser. There's gonna be a little box, there's gonna be a bed. The shelf thing, they asked me to shelf, it's not even, who's gonna argue with that shelf? Right? And then I clean up the details because chrome's no good anymore. Now it's polished stainless, which I already know about. And it's pushed to open, so you don't have to deal with the handles, and the hinge is chrome. And you don't care. But it's nice details. And then they can be colors or whatever. That's fine. We can go crazy. Another fun thing that I do is I discovered that they throw out the offcuts of, so I'm not like a, I haven't mentioned even for a second like sustainability or anything like that, but of course I'm trying to reuse things and take what's there in principle, both conceptually and literally. And so we're just starting this new project where we're just making plates from the offcuts. They're there. They throw them out. it's sustainable because they go back in the ground. I'm like, but you cut it. So anyway, so they did it. I designed it too thin the first time, and now it's a little bit of a problem, but I'm going to work it out. It's underway. I'm also for the working people, but I'm also, I don't really know what to say about this, except that there's like a series of projects that are like wherein I'm celebrating communism recently that are just, they are what they are. Some guy asked me to make a play from a book by Brigitte Reimann in East Germany, and I was like, well, let's just celebrate Plattenbau and East German construction. And then I was like, you can make the play however you want. Great, guys. I'm not sure about the play. It's in German. I just made this, but a fake Plattenbau wall painted, it's so weird and so beautiful. It makes me happy. And I made and I got obsessed with this thing. Have you ever, I'm going to show a photo of this in the next lecture. But if you Google like Plattenbau after they get taken down, you'll notice that every single room is like pink and blue and purple and individualized. And I'm very fascinated with like the individual in communism and how in fact that flourished and how you think of it as this like gray monolith because it has like, that's what it is to the outside, or at least that's what like nostalgia is, as they say in but in fact, there's like this weird interiors that are very deeply personal, and so I started to get into that, and I started to talk about like different leftover personalizations. You get it. You get it. And then I had this whole discussion about like what's bourgeois and what's not, and apparently the carpet is a symbol of bourgeois, but I don't know. And then of course, in the end of all talking about communism, you just think, like, particularly about East Germany specifically, like, if only they'd given it a little bit more, And I part of me subscribes to that, like, you just like give up, like even just like we were holding on to bourgeois concepts. I mean, I'm from Manhattan, so I don't know what we exactly refers to, but I find myself recently saying we communists quite a bit. You get the idea. Like that sculpture, I mean, it happens to be a projection. I need a better photo of that. It just opened like 2 weeks ago, and you can go see it. It's on for 2 years every month if you happen to be in Berlin. But this, like this East German sculpture that I had remade, and then they projected on it, and then I brought my streetlight back, which turns out to also be an East German streetlight. So I don't know what I want to say about it. So that happened, and then somebody asked me to do a monument for German reunification in Leipzig. I don't think they understood that I was American when I was asked for that. I didn't win, but I'm into it. I'm way into a monument of East German reunification, and that's like the signs. That's like a reference to the signs that they had in the protest in Leipzig in the middle of '89 before the wall fell down. And they had these like weird sound things, and we had this entire curated little world about these protests in Leipzig. Again, I didn't win. And then I got asked, and then like the next day, it was like last month, I got asked to make a museum about this book, which is about that communism's not such a bad idea in Albania. So I just mention it, it's in the zeitgeist. And I move on, new topic. It's just an observation that I'm fond of at the moment. Like buildings and construction account for 37% of all emissions. Surely many of you are familiar with that fact. But I just want to say, like, that's not buildings per se that it's at fault. It's like, it means like as a society, 7% of our consumption is born from people standing there before we do anything. And so I guess I wanted to posit, like going backwards in this lecture and forwards, that one way to think about it, of course, is like materiality and how we construct differently. And that is clear that we must do that. And I'm on board with that, infinitely. I just want to posit like the other thing that like we could redo how we live also. Like if you just like flip that fact around, like we as a baseline before we eat, before you actually get warm, before you actually use energy, which we constantly do, it's like, let's think about life, and then like life changes, and then you theoretically can make architecture different. So I'm trying to convince my students in Angewandte and elsewhere, and some of my clients to like think seasonally. So like that museum that I just mentioned, we're trying to just like restore the thing that's there and build a tent out front and be like, all you need is a tent. Like, what are you gonna do in the rain anyway? Like, nobody's gonna come. So just like, fuck it. You know, just like have, like, what do you really need? You know, like, you're gonna use this thing on a nice day, and you're just stay home on a rainy day, because the world has already kind of done that. So like, why don't we rejigger living standards? This has nothing to do with living standards. Maybe I misplaced that. Okay. Also nothing to do with living standards. But I guess it's partly it's like a kind of pleasure of doing what's found. Like, I found this rock in the yard, I tied it to a column, and I sit on it, and you look out the window, and it's enough. Like, I don't want to misclaim that like that building is particularly sustainable. It's a lot of concrete, it's a lot of glass. I mean, it's German glass, so it's extremely efficient, and yada yada, and it works. My conscience is clear, but I wouldn't say that I went out of my way to do it. I wish that I had, in fact, done it differently. But I just want to say, just like taking what's around helps me deal a lot. And part of that is like thinking about, and I'm not trying to sell this, this is more like a question to myself, like, when is efficiency good and when is efficiency not good? Right? So that this flower vase of ours is like a question about efficiency. And I think this is like a really nice house that is 140 square meters, and it has 6 bedrooms, and it's like a vacation house owned by 20 people. So that on a basic level in the Rockaways in New York, so it's like it's actually in New York City, and you can reach it by subway, which is quite fun. And that's the living side, and that's the staircase, and that's like the sleeping room. 6 beds with Jack and Jill toilets, and like a kind of motel circulation. This is another, but sorry, going back to like this thing, you know, so this is a deconstruction reconstruction strategy, which I think is somehow related, because we're in Holland. I could talk about this maybe. Forget about being in Holland. Just like, you know, what I think old OMA is about. Like, I think that, you know, when those old REM diagrams where you have like words stacked up and like jammed into each other, which I like graphically feel dated, but like conceptually feel like sometimes to me like that's still the new hip shit. So this is one of those, right? Like jammed in a shape. This is also one of those, and this is a house we built. The other one is like starting construction soon. This is a house we built with like, you know, kitchen, dining, livings in the barn, and like sleeping is in the barn barrack, jammed together. It's my car, but it's not my house. This one we made of wood. I mean, it's insane how big the pieces of wood that they use in Germany are. It's like makes it feel like unsustainable. Again, even though you're using wood, you're like, what? Because in America, they make it, you know, the wood is nothing. It's like a pack of cigarettes, and that wood is like a weapon. But you get this. You can imagine where you sleep and where you eat. You can imagine everything about this house, and it's clear, but it's also, is it really like killing the rabbit? We could see. I'm happy about it, you know. And I like the moments like this photograph when you don't understand it. I also like. So, I'm in a debate about that. How much time have I been talking, would you say? Did we start on time?
Yeah,
We started later. Because I've been doing a lot of work lately. We're doing a big project in Cotonou in Benin, in West Africa, wherein we were asked to make a half art center, half sports center, and we do it together with these Spanish guys, Arquitectura G, who are lovely friends. It's a public park. In the neighborhood, it prioritizes human scale and public space. That's a note to myself. It needs an axonometric. We're in an office, if you're watching. Or someone. Essentially, we took the program that we were given and we put a running track as the roof, and it's in the middle of sub-Saharan Africa, so it's obviously exceedingly hot, and you want outdoor shaded space. It's straightforward enough. So the roof becomes the topic. What does the roof need to be? The roof needs to be the running track, and by like separating the two things, you make a public space. Right? So the middle becomes exceedingly important. Right? So the middle becomes like this space for concerts, for whatever you want, and so on. But then it becomes like, at the scale of the neighborhood, it still like kind of functions. It's still like more or less a personage size, despite being an enormous thing. And then each program has its own little thing, its own little building that holds up the roof. And this is like a little digression, but Francis Carre's office is like 10 minutes from my office in Berlin. And as you surely know, he builds a lot of things in red brick, clay red brick in sub-Saharan Africa. And I felt really weird about using like the local material, which is like, of course, naturally what you do. So you're already in trouble as a New Yorker in Africa with any project. You're already like, what am I being asked to like import like a European sensibility, which is inherently patronizing? Am I being asked to like study the local condition, also patronizing? It's hard to do. So I have dragged him now twice to my office for him to like bless, like, yes, it's okay for you to use these red bricks. But I keep asking the same question, like, can you make it more okay? He's like, I can't help you anymore. So sure enough, they're 30-centimeter red clay bricks, which come out of the ground. They're made on site, and they cost almost nothing. They're super good thermal insulating bricks. They in fact hold up the concrete. Like, you don't have to reinforce it, which is crazy. You have to put like 3% of cement into it. 3%. It's completely reasonable. Apparently, like, the tipping point, like, sustainability-wise, is like if you start to put 15% cement in it, then you're basically making concrete, and you're cheating. Which he also does, just by the way. He's like, I do that. He's like, don't even worry about that. But I'm trying. I think it's a great project. It's going to start construction next year. I think you get it. And then, complete non sequitur, because that's like how life is right now. Non sequiturs. My car, and my interest in cars, which is a whole other thing. So, Cars in the Public Joy was a thing that we did last year, where it occurs. First of all, I like cars. I mean, so I should admit this like basic thing that I like this uncool thing. Like, cars are, middle-aged man, 2 kids, likes cars, like, not a good story, right? So, but I own that, like many things that I do that I'm like ashamed of. But what occurred to me about cars is also that they are like this oddly private thing in the public sphere, and I'm interested in like public-private interaction in general. Like, I'm interested in like assumptions that we've made as society about what should be private and what should be public, and perhaps discovering that we've agreed to something that we didn't mean to agree to. So one of them is like, I just learned recently after doing this that like in New York City, you couldn't park on the street until 1953. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I just assumed that was a fact of life. That, but it was only the car lobby that said you could park on the street. So that this weird thing that for $2 a year, you could have like 10, 20 square meters in the middle of the public road is outrageous and insane. So I started making tables on cars, and cars that become public things, and cars that become kind of more interactive. So you sit and you have drinks around this Jaguar. This has nothing to do with anything. It's clear enough. This is just in this project, which is like a fuck up. Like, this is just like it's just like a bad thing. So I made this together with Bless, who I'll talk about in a second, who are these fashion designers. And I was like, let's make a vacuum cleaner that's like really cool and special and like really nice. And they just said like, I made it, and it cost like thousands of 2,000 euros to make a chrome vacuum cleaner, with an office chair thing, and you can sit on it. And he's just like, and the blessed woman, Desiree, just called me up and said, Sam, this looks like it was made by a sophisticated vacuum company. Like, why the fuck would I care? Is what she meant by that. Not to be confused with this is cool. And I've never thought about it again. And I use it as my vacuum cleaner, and that's the end of it. Because she's right. Like, there's no idea. It's just like, and I don't work. No sophisticated vacuum company called. So, basta. This is a little bit, has a better story, right? You sit on this sub, you lounge, you can like have your drink. It becomes a public, like a sun space, and like again, this private thing in the public, which matters to me very much. That's a light we've been working on for a decade. So the blessed people, who are fantastic fashion designers, these two women, Desiree and Ines, who I love them, and they're way crazier than me. They like call me, and I love that I'm recently becoming this for other people. Like they call me as like their technical guy, and like I'm not per se a technical guy, but I'm so fine if you want to like call me as your like technical whatever. They're like, we need to make a sauna here, and we want to make a sauna, and I'm like, okay. But it's in front of Dan Graham's pavilion. And I don't know, well, now you know what I do. And if you don't know what Dan Graham does, it's like a better version of what I do, right? So Dan Graham, and it's actually the best Dan Graham. It's the only Dan Graham that is a sculpture that you can buy coffee in. Like, it's actually functional and useful. And so it's like even better. It's like the best sculptor that looks like what I already do in the best project that's actually functional. And then they're like, you build something here for the sauna. And I'm like, ooh, that's gonna be a problem. And I don't really make like hippie shit, so like, it's not, what was I gonna do? So I came up with this idea that we should buy an S-Class and build a sauna in it, and they were like, okay. And this is our, but they were like full on the beats. And I want you to know, like, I drive this every day still. Like, this is my car. It's the shit. And they're very, very cool. And I had no idea that they were gonna take it so far. I was just like, what's modern? What's like modern and not modern, and like looks good in front of Dan Graham that isn't Dan Graham, like that isn't me, and like is you, and trying to bridge all these things. You get it. And then they make a blanket because they're nuts. It's the same, but you understand why the vacuum cleaner thing is no good, no? Now you see that, and you're like, of course, get out of here with your like 3,000 euro vacuum cleaner, like stuff. But I want to show this. I don't need to say much about this. The first and most important thing to say about it is it's very beautiful, and you can go see it. And I bet you many of you won't go see it because it's like on the 4th floor of a building in Amsterdam that you would just never in a million years walk by and you wouldn't even find the sign unless you were, it's like a dead end on a, whatever the opposite of a canal is, like a spit of land. It's weird that they Floss, which is quite a good company, as you surely already know, and I'm suggesting in many ways here. Anyway, they built this showroom in the 4th. Go check it out. That's what I want to say. It's really dope. I wonder if anybody ever goes to look at it. Has anybody ever been to this showroom that's like, right, exactly. See, go check it out. It's really, like I've spent years making it. Please. And he's there. They're selling lights, so they give you the full tour, like immediately. Just be like, I'm an architect. You don't even you say anything you want. Sam sent me. They want to show light. Right? So they want walls, and we had to make white walls, and so we made white walls out of steel that look like paper, like the model. It's very, very simple and beautiful. So we made a floor plan that's like, okay, you need an office, you need divisions for practical light reasons, and then you need surfaces for practical light reasons, and so we stacked it up in this extremely elegant way that it's like the steel bending in its own weight, so it's like slightly imperfect. And if you go, which I obviously have already demanded that you do go, you know, give it a push. It's like really moves, because it's steel and it's just like on its tiny sticks. And I'm still slightly angry with the engineers that it's 6 millimeters instead of 4 millimeters, because I'm sure it would work even thinner. And I'm not Ishigami, like I'm not obsessed with everything being thinner. I'm just, it's fun to go to the limit, and this is one of those things. And one that you can see, of course. You visit it. And the space, I mean, you get it. And I just thought, you know, because it's a nice photo, those are the Spanish guys who we do the African thing with, and my partner Barbara, who's great, and we've been working on all kinds of stuff. Now, so that's like takes us to, sorry, I can't touch my face and do this. Now last week we handed in a building permit on a 44-story building. And we handed in another one on an 18-story building, and one goes in like one side of this broken out program, Rem Koolhaas diagram with letters story. This is this one. And then another one's like clear and simple. And I'm not sure which is better. As a way forward, both towers are cool. Basically, the mandate was fancy houses, less fancy houses, even less fancy houses, a restaurant in the middle, a hotel, an office, and retail. And so we just stack up the program, exactly like they asked. And they were like, this size apartment, and then this size apartment, and then this size one. We snuck in like a Corbusier section of 3-pack, 1 unité pack into the thing, and we had to beg for that, but they were like, fine if you do all the other things that we asked for. So I call it Sun, Moon, Star, because you need a funny name for things in Albania, but it also makes sense that like it's somehow on this axis, and we put a moon clock on the roof from Pioveni Fabi, who are these other great architects who made a moon clock that I'm obsessed with. So there's the moon clock, and there, you know, and here in this drawing you see clearly that there's like different programs, different things. The sign was not actually requested. We added the sign. Like once you start having layers, you're like want more layers, but I think it makes some sense, right? That you add up the various programs, and that is a kind of simple enough diagram of how it worked. And they really are slightly different, different floor plans in different spots, and it somehow relates very much to the kind of chaos of the place, right? So the chaos of the place is that they don't really know what exactly is the right thing to put in there, right? The structure is pretty clear, like theoretically, you know. So it's something to do with the floor plans, but mostly it's like a different kind of facade detail that makes a different kind of quality of apartment with loggias or balconies or exterior sun shading or interior setbacks, etc. Like, okay, there's the Corbusier unité thing where it's like got double high space, but on the whole, it's more, you know, and then here where there are small balconies, that's like one hotel room, one corner. I think you can follow the logic of it. But the logic of it works because that's also what the place is like. Let's see if that, wait. This is the first time I've ever talked about it because we did it, we started in July and we handed in a building permit, whatever that was, October 30th. And we're sort of debating about that. I mean, you can imagine the retail has its another like baseline that does something else. And then on a recent trip, we found this building and I was like, yeah, they already made it. Like conceptually, they were like, and that is indeed 3 kinds of housing. It's office, housing, hotel. Like it's even clearer. It's frankly, like diagrammatically, it's better than mine. Although I think that my shape is nicer and so forth, but otherwise it's like the same thing, and it's in another city, but it's half an hour away. So you get that. Now, the other one we did, this guy came, and we're about to talk about this more than the client ever did, because he's like, I trust you, it's cool, let's go get lunch. That's the kind of guy this is. He's like, middle-class housing, simple, I own the ground, let's make it not too big, not too anything. And so this one, it kind of comes like a very different solution, which is just a round building. The other one has like quite some site constraints, as you could tell, and it's like obnoxiously thin in one direction because of another site constraint that you wouldn't naturally do. And this one's like a mere 18 stories, which for me is obviously still enormous. But what the round thing does, it's like makes a kind of equality. It's sort of it's the opposite thing, right? It suggests like it's all the same. People are all the same. The people who live there are all the same. In both cases, we demanded like a public roof space that everybody could use. Let's see if they keep that. But it's in the building permit, so you don't need to read this. You can see what it is. Like it's itself like a reference to a kind of simplicity of like a housing scheme, right? We tried many things, and we got to the most simple one, and it's the same piece of facade a bunch of times. It's shaded. It's like we're going to make a little bit less glass, and we're going to cover below the handrail height. That's like a change since this, perhaps. It works at the ground floor. It leaves some public space open by virtue of it being a circle, so it doesn't like infect the neighbors. It's actually like, and you can draw the floor plans like that. The core is a little bit more advanced, but you can draw it like that. It's a very relaxed building, and it's very clear what it's doing. And I guess I'm trying to equate in my mind this clarity with like that Flusslight, right? Like that, like, you know, I had to make like a streetlight table, or we had to make like a streetlight coming out of a table to like eventually figure out like, why don't we just use a track and a stick? And this was like that same thing on a much bigger scale on. Also, like they were done in that order, like a couple weeks apart. Like, okay, we had to kind of come up with a concept, and I wonder if, I mean, because of course we could have pushed this to be something else. Like we could have artificially made it more of a deconstruction or a different story. And I'm debating about which is better. I mean, to me, the stacked sun, moon, star has a kind of clear diagram, apropos those OMA diagrams. I'm not trying to compete with the man himself, but this is like one of the questions. So there's one more set of projects, because now we're big in Albania. So we did that. That's got a building permit. That's got the first half of a building permit. And then we, together with Muto and Bauku, won 2 other gigantic buildings 6 weeks ago. And so we won the Cataster office. Again, Communism and I have like a new relationship. So it's the office where they kind of sort out who owns what now that, you know, we're back to advanced capitalism. So that government office we won, and then we won another kind of tower project. So the tower on the left is in a way like disparate, deconstructed thing coming together, right? So it's cores and semi-public functions on the left side. It's like the circle, square, triangle are cores, public functions, and they like come and suck onto the bar and make the circulation. That'll become clear. And the other one is like an existing building where we just blow it up and jam everything together to make a new singular clear form. So it occurred to me today only, making this lecture, thanks for having me, that those are like the 2 things that I'm debating about, and I'm still like, which way do I think is good? And I think that like the question of these 2 diagrams applies to every single project that I talk about here, right? Like in a way, that's a triangle bed, and that's like a streetlight table, and both are fine maybe. That one thing is like kind of, if you think, like, this is a drawing from Pier Paolo Tamburelli, the Bauku guy, trying to say that the public space and the publicness of the Vicenza by Palladio is somehow related to this Bower vault form that we're making. And then I think in this particular project, like I more than anyone else like pushed for like this jamming together one, because that's like a strategy that I think that I'm comfortable with, as opposed to the clear one. I also think Eddie Rama, who is in a sense the judge of this thing, prefers the madness version of me. I'm not sure about that. But in both cases, you ended up making kind of quality public space that comes from either of those strategies. So it works either way. Like you can do it in both ways, right? And you can understand those buildings like in a civic way with some clarity. You can understand them as volumes, and you can understand them as kind of. But there are two propositions that are doing very, very different architectural exercises. Right, and you see that like crystal clear from these two floor plans, right? You don't have to like, please don't like interrogate either floor plan like deeply, because it's like you have to change the cores and you have to change everything because it's just a competition. But in principle, you sleep in the bar, you do something else in the shapes, right? And in the other one, you take functions and you kind of neatly arrange them around the existing, including archives. And so there needed to be an archive, so fair bit of dark space in the middle. So there's a kind of logic of having like a treasure chest Palladian volume. And then you get like a knock-on space of this public space within the top of that thing, not unlike Palladio. Just conceptually. But again, I like simplicity. So I like just the vase. That's it. Thanks for entertaining me.
We have some time for some questions.
No questions? Yeah.
Any questions?
Me too. I'm having a candy.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is kind of what I perceived from listening to your presentation is that there seems to be some sort of like contradictions that you kind of play with. You talk about sustainability, but then you also make a vacuum cleaner made out of chromium. Talk about
it's polished stainless, for the record, but I know but you're not wrong.
You talk about community and the importance of that building in that first example you showed, but then you also have these kind of apartment building styles that kind of reinforce segregated classes of different classes. You talk about really kind of like bunching together different shapes, but then you also like simplicity as well. I guess my question is there anything that is consistent in your design philosophy? And I don't know, what is that something that drives your curiosity?
No, that is a very fair question. I don't know, man. I mean, that's where you been in the last hour. I don't know what's consistent at the moment. I've suddenly everything got in question. You know, like last year, I'd be like community people together, and indeed, I make like an intentionally segregated building, right? And I think it's good actually, but not the segregation, but the building. No, that is my question, and I appreciate you asking me, and I don't have an answer, but I feel like appropriately called out on that particular thing. I mean, the vacuum cleaner and the fucking ship sailed on like me using too much stainless to screw around. Although, when I start thinking, but suddenly now when I start thinking about like the amount of steel to make that vacuum thing, it's like whatever compared to the concrete of that 44-story segregated building. I mean, I think my clients would be like totally fine to be like, yeah, of course, there's rich people at the top. I mean, I want to deal with it And maybe by talking about it, I do start to deal with, I mean, specifically like that community thing, right? I mean, on the other hand, I was doing this thing where I was making things for people in Berlin, and people who might sit in this room, right? Like relatively engaged, successful people, right? That's 10 years of work. All the people who bought into that Baugruppe and made that community are people who, like, we all would kind of hang out with. Like, every single one of us would, like, you know, we're gonna run into all those people over time, right? And then suddenly, like, Benin or Tirana or that tower or that, certainly the Fruit Depot, I think like I'm into something else, like some larger group of people. So and speaking with them, and now I'm in another discussion. And I'm really happy to not be like in a minor echo chamber, right? Like there will be like, you know, apropos Tuesday, like I don't know any Republicans that I'm not related to, yet it's, you know, how many million people, Solomon, voted for Trump? Like, exactly. So I've met, the only ones that I've ever really like discussed it with are my own relatives. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like I'm excited to get into a sphere where I'm talking to not like left-wing Democrat, like certainly the people, you know, I'm trying to, so that's like a bridge. And so I don't know what that means to me and what that means to my context yet. I'm so happy though, now that we're talking, to be out of like just Democrats, artists, like the Venn diagram of like Democrats, artists, and curators, and people who really spend money on design, which is like, you know, it's you, 50, and a couple thousand more, right? As opposed to the, you know, like it's as many people as live in that building, right? Like that building has 200 and some apartments. So it's more than all, you know, and when you put those three buildings together, it's coming on 1,000 apartments. So it's like, what does that mean? I don't know what it means yet. I don't know what it means, a community of 1,000 people, but I think it like scales, right? It's like now I'm concerned with the community at the ground. I'm concerned with like, what's like urban, like the urban scale of community. That's like why that tower is like lifted up off the ground and so on, which I didn't even talk about, but you saw perhaps. I'm trying to deal with it myself rather than answer your question, sorry.
But I mean, you're also allowed to evolve a position as clients and circumstances and scales of work evolve, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
but it's in progress as opposed to done.
we're all expected now to have such very clear positions that maybe that's not necessarily always fair.
I mean, to that end, I really liked having the position of I'm interested in community, and I'm interested in people coming together, and the kitchens and the house and the small houses like really bear that out, right? And as soon as you get into like gigantic things around the world that I'm like by default less connected to, I don't know what it also feels patronizing to talk about like that community of the community center, and like, you know, I have photos of like people who I talked to about who are going to be in Benin, and I had them in the slideshow in the 320 version, and I was like, what am I going to put pictures of like the kids who I talked to about making soccer in the middle of that thing? Like, what do I know about that? Like, I saw them, they're happy that they can play in the middle, but you get that too, and like that's it. I'm worried about being patronizing, like, as I also become, I mean, it's just like I was already very privileged. Like I got here with a lot of privilege. Like my father was a graphic designer. My grandfather was an architect. My uncle's an architect. I'm not apologizing for that, but like I got, and at the time of community and like the time of the first projects, like I was like a young struggling architect. And now, like as of today, me showing 44-story towers, like I'm I'm not young and struggling. I am like hair professor in Austria. Like, I crossed my mind to buy a electric Mercedes, very expensive electric Mercedes today. Partly for the environment, but partly because I just wanted a new car because I can. Because, and I don't want to waste money either. I just mean, like a big part of it is like addressing my own privilege at this moment in time that I don't know where I fit. Like before, it's fine. Like I was just like a privileged jerk, and I kind of could apologize about it. But then I like made it, and like I made it in some way. I mean, okay, let's see. And it's like I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying it's a problem now where I position myself in relation to that. To my own, who I am suddenly. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you for the lecture. It seems like you have one foot in the US and one foot in Europe. And you also mentioned that you studied in Texas.
That's true.
But I mean, from the projects, it seems like you've migrated more to Berlin. But are there still opportunities for you in the US? Like, how does that look from the eyes of an architect?
Okay, like we'll leave Tuesday aside. The US is a really, I mean, apropos of that last discussion about the privilege and the money thing, New York is the greatest city in the world. I'm from Manhattan, you know. I really love New York. Like, my family's there. I go there, you know, with some regularity. But in fact, it's an awful place to be a young architect. Like really, really awful. And like how many American offices can anybody name more than 10 American offices under the age of 50? I tell you the answer is no. And it's a lot bigger than the Netherlands, and all of you can name 50 offices under the age of 50 here. Sorry, that's not me. It's just gonna. Right. So the problem of that is like related to the last thing. Like it's about money in America in a way that's really different, and I assume that that's only going to become more so apropos Tuesday. I mean, it really, you know, I think running a practice in New York, and everybody talks about New York money. Like my best friend from college, who's visiting this week in Berlin. You know, he became an art dealer, and like it's just like everything's about. I hope you're not watching, Mike. Everything's like a deal, like real estate. Like it's all real estate. Like architecture is real estate. I mean, it's real estate here too. It's real estate in Tirana, sort of, but it's not really real estate if they let me do that. Like that's not purely real estate. Like that's like getting outside of that. Does that make sense? I mean, there's like a whole other problem that like school should be not costing $100,000 a year, and if you leave school with a lot of debt, you can't fuck around making streetlight tables for 3 years, right? You just can't do that. You can't deconstruct the kitchen. I mean, deconstructing the kitchen is like the worst economic idea you can possibly do, right? There's a reason why kitchens are systems. Right? The reason why there are systems so that they're products, so you can align them and have flexibility, and you know, it's like you can't compete with IKEA. You know, it's like, you know, so it's only with a little bit of cash and some spare time that you can like sustain yourself upending making triangle kitchens, which again is the worst business idea ever, unless you maybe make it and get a professorship in some tower in Albania. Then it's okay, but. It could have not gotten a professorship in a tower in Albania, and then, you know, here we are. You know, what if it was bad? It's entirely possible. Go ahead.
This question is not really about architecture, but it's like, you know, architecture schools also teach us to be so rational in design, and like, you know, you have to be rational and blah, 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 but it does not exist. Like, that rationality is kind of there everywhere. So do you think that, and people follow it blindly also sometimes, the rationality. So do you think rationality is a religion?
Yes, but I'm totally in it. Like, rationality is my Jesus, yeah. Sorry, absolutely. No, don't think for a second to get rid of rationality. No, irrational shit comes all the time, all day. All day, your girlfriend wants something, your kids want something, it doesn't make any sense. don't worry, you can get off track of rationality. Stick with it, but you're still going to get off it. It's fine. Really, that's my answer to rationality. Yes. I'm so shocked that you asked that question. I must have not given a clear lecture. Everything is meant to be rational. Like, there's a rational set of decisions. They might be stupid, but they are rational. And they might be wrong. That's rational is not correct. I mean, now don't misunderstand me. Like, there's not a right way and a wrong way. I just mean, like, if I can't tell you a very simple, in fact, if you can't read a simple story, forget about what I say. If you can't look at that slide, all those slides, without me saying a damn thing, then it's not working, right? And I'm sure that there are some that don't make any sense if I don't speak, in which case I should probably take them out of my lecture.
I wanted to ask, like, in your design, basically, you're saying that you might use some found objects or like maybe cheap materials, but at the same time, they look and feel very expensive. So I actually wanted to ask, like, are you planning to make something cheap and more affordable for less privileged people?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Like, really, like that light, like that flow light, right? Is like nothing. Like, you can make it yourself. Like, not that I want to get into like Enzo Mari, autopressione. How do you say that? You know what I mean? The Enzo Mari thing where like makes everything out of like a couple wood slats and you can only spend like. But in theory, I'm looking for ideas that are that are nothing, right? I mean, and then I run up against like economic realities of. I also don't want to sell things. Like, it's not that I hate selling things. I was about to say I hate selling things. I'm just not very good at it. Not very good at like selling, like it turns out like to sell a light or a plate or a cutting board or a vase, it requires like a logic that and a rationality that I don't personally have. But I want the ideas to get there. So like in theory, that light, which I'm pretty chuffed about, like it's gonna be from Floss and it's gonna be super nice, so it's not gonna be cheap, but in principle. Yes, so much. No, I would like, but that doesn't, yes, and like, I don't want to make excuses, but like, it's so sad, like, there's not a lot in the world between IKEA and Floss. Like, there's hay, so like, I would like to work Rolf. and Rolf, I think Rolf will maybe call one day, but, what? Surax is good. I called Valerie Tron last week, so I'm working on it. She's owned by, so I'm working on it, but Valerie Chen is like Xerox, expensive, owned by Xerox. So I'm like in this, I'm also an architect, and so like, I you know, it's like by accident that I sneak into design stuff. So I'm working on it. I'm working down from like $10,000 streetlight tables to like $1,000 flow lights, right? And I'm gonna get down. I'm gonna get there. My vase is only $120. I mean, but I basically get nothing from it, but I don't care because they're cool. The vase is cool. It's affordable. Sorry. But I feel bad about this. This is me like I'm like having a therapy session now. I mean, this whole thing is like a therapy session. You never know. That's the problem with therapy.
Is it on? Yeah. I also have a question. It's about deconstruction. I mean, on the kitchen, of course, it feels supernatural. You deconstruct the functions, the objects, etc. And I was wondering, like, on a bigger scale in architecture, like we saw clearly, like on the building, you deconstruct the program super clearly. But I was also wondering, what are other things that passes through your mind to deconstruct on this bigger scale, like, because we also see a lot of colors, a lot of grades, like vertical things, horizontal things, like on the bigger scale, on the architectural scale.
Well, yeah. Anything. You know, I mean, it turns out that I'm concerned, like, broadly with the domestic, right? Like, I didn't, except for the first project, like, and somehow the kitchens, like, I'm, at the moment, like, it's not, like, it's super spatial on the level of, like, interior architecture, right? Like, none of those apartments I mean, okay, the ceiling heights are different, but it's not like this space is thought about in any of that building, except like a few spots. Like this space is important, this space is important, this space, and then like other things are kind of formed out of that. I think because I jumped like an absurd scale jump, and I want to go back to like rethinking it from a more spatial configuration way, in the way that I presented that first project. So that first project has to do with like coming down to like what are the spaces that get put together in contrast to each other, that make a kind of scenography of life. And so I'm interested in that. It's not so specific. I tend to like observe, I have like a stock of things that I observe, and of course like I have like a whole world of bathrooms that like I haven't gotten to yet, but are coming. Because I think bathrooms are also subject to the Nazis decided all kinds of things, and there's just like, and how weird is it that the French put carpets in their bathrooms and so on. It's like there's a lot there. And then there's Slavoj Žižek. I encourage everybody to look. I was told never to talk about it again, but by my business partner, she's like, people don't want to hear about that again. But Slavoj Žižek has this thing about toilets, which is brilliant, which is just that toilets are in fact like ideological tools, even though we all take the same shit, more or less. So I think that I think it's in everything. And I think you can deconstruct and reconstruct everything. The chair, the coffee maker. It's a question of whether it's worth the trouble and whether you're going to like make a living doing deconstructing and reconstructing a coffee maker, but you can. Also, a train station.
Thank you.
I was suspicious of
Thank
my
you.
own answer.